What's up, all you learners out there in Learning Land? Tyler from 10 Thumbs Pro, and today I want to talk to you about the most important thing that you probably currently in this moment are not practicing or you are not studying. Phrasing. Say it with me now. Phrasing. It's important for me that you know here at 10 Thumbs, my goal isn't just to help you teach your song. Although sometimes that is the goal with some specific lessons, the overall arcing goal at 10 Thumbs is to turn you into a musician, not someone who can strum the C chord and the F chord and the G chord, which is cool, which is fun, but I want to make you a musician. And to do that, you have to understand what phrasing is, how it works, all that good stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a deep dive into it. Before we get there, I want you to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a lesson. There's a printable tab for this lesson by becoming a Patreon with links in the notes. You don't need that, but it will accelerate your learning, and it's cheaper than a cheap cheeseburger. Printable tabs for this lesson and all our previous lessons as well by becoming a Patreon. Okay, but without further ado, let's break this one down. Grab your ukulele. Brain and attention span, we're going to focus on the brain for a little while, but we are going to jump into what phrasing is. Phrasing is a musical sentence, or more specifically, a melodic sentence. Phrasing, the reason that we probably don't know what it is on the ukulele is because we don't need to breathe to play our instrument. I can play these notes for as long as I want to do. And as long as I don't get tired, I can keep going. I don't need to breathe. A saxophone player, a trumpet player, a clarinet player, a singer, all of these people have to breathe to play their instruments, including the voice. So they very much know what phrasing is. By understanding what a phrase is, you can improve your soloing, your singing, your transposition, your ability to analyze melody, as well as your ability to compose melody. So how does that work? Because it helps you identify things like resolution. If you take a specific phrase, you can identify the notes played over that chord and how they resolve that phrase, meaning what's the last note that they play. Resolution specifically is the last note that you play. You resolve both phrases and you resolve songs. A song is almost entirely always resolved by playing the root note of the song. So if you're in the key of D, you would resolve or finish a song by playing a D note, whether it's D major, D minor, D Dorian, it doesn't really matter. You would finish by playing a D note. I wrote a song one time and I finished it on the A note and the song doesn't resolve. And the listener feels uneasy with that because resolution gives you a sense of gratification and a sense of completion. So the first step that we need to take in this journey is the ability to identify a phrase. Even before I'm going to teach you how to analyze them, we want to be able to identify them. So let's start off with the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Let's look at the lyrics. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. I'm breathing after high. So that means that would be a musical phrase. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high is our first musical phrase. Followed by, and the dreams that you dreamed of once in a lullaby. So we get once in a lullaby, and those trills at the end are also part of the phrase because we still haven't breathed. We still haven't breathed yet. We still haven't breathed. What's the past participle of breathe? We still haven't breathed yet. We still haven't breathed. We still haven't taken a breath. A great exercise to do is to get some sheet music. If you have a scanner at home, you can take a book that you have with sheet music in it and scan it and print it out, or you can buy individual sheet music off the internet, scan it and print it out. I wouldn't do it directly in your book because if you make any mistakes, you're not going to be able to undo them, and the ability to put pen to paper to this is a really, really nice thing. So you print them out and then you put the phrases in brackets. The next thing you want to look at is how long the phrase is. Our first phrase is 4 measures long. Now this is pretty typical. You'll see phrases anywhere from 4 measures to 2 measures. Sometimes they're a little bit longer, sometimes they're a little bit shorter. They can vary in their length, but 4 measures is a pretty typical length. All around me are familiar faces, worn out places. After identifying where the phrase starts and where it finishes, the next thing that you want to look at is how the phrase resolves, meaning what's the last note of the phrase. In our first example, way up high, high is a G note. So we finish in a G note over the C chord. The three notes in the key of, are in the chord of C, C major, are C, E, and G. So our G note is a chord tone, so this is a safe resolution. Not all resolutions are created equal. Some are safe and some are semi-stable. Well, let's use, instead of safe, let's use stable. Some are stable, some are semi-stable, and some are unstable. Chord tones will always be stable, meaning if it's a note in the chord, it will be stable. If you choose to resolve your phrase with a tone that is outside of the chord, you are either going to get semi-stable or unstable. But that's okay. A semi-stable, cool, it adds a little bit of tension and color, and an unstable one is also okay when used sparingly because it wants to give the melody movement, and that creates tension, which is later solved with release further down the line. So if you can think about it, it's like squeezing, it's and then finally the next phrase resolves on a chord tone, you get relief. So when you have unstable phrasing, that's okay when used sparingly and used consciously. We see this in our next phrase. If we put up the next phrase, the very last note is a B note played over an A minor. Now the B note to the A minor is what's known as the ninth interval or the second interval, depending on if it is an octave above or just one note above the root. Understanding intervals is going to help a lot in this conversation as well. Another link to our video breaking down intervals, which I think, in my personal opinion, understanding what an interval is your first step in this whole conversation. So the B note is the ninth interval or the second interval to the A minor, and this is what's known as a semi-stable resolution. It's not a chord tone. The A minor has the A note, the G note, and the E note. I'm getting pretty good at knowing my chord tones. That's pretty cool. And the B note is not in that chord. But by adding the B note to it, we create what's called an A minor 9, which is a very cool chord. Right? Dissonant. Slightly dissonant, but not too bad. It's a really sweet sounding chord. It always reminds me of Al Green when he uses the D minor 9 in I'm so in love with you. He sings the E note over that D minor there. That's an E note, so it makes it a D minor 9, which is what we're doing here. Cool stuff. So we have two phrases. Our first phrase finishes on a chord tone, nice and safe. Our next one finishes on the ninth interval. What's the next phrase look like? Let's change songs and let's go to Space Oddity for a second. And let's look at that first phrase from the very, very beginning of the song that sounds like this. Major tom to ground control. If we bring up our melody and we take a look at it, we are starting off and navigating from a C chord to an E minor chord in the key of C, which is known as a 1-3. All of these chords have Roman numeral assignings to the key, and learning that can also be beneficial not only in your ability to communicate with other people, but your ability to transpose music as well. So if you want a little help with the Roman numerals, another video in the link. You guys are going to have some homework after this one. Here for this one, we're going to take a look at the whole phrase. We're playing a C note, C, 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 D, C, B. And our phrase resolves on a B note on our E minor chord. Starting on a C note, which is a chord tone of our C, traveling to a D, we see that ninth interval again, which isn't a chord tone, but it is a nice semi-stable chord tone that's not an alien note, and you are welcome to use the ninth interval over most chords, and it's going to sound pretty good. Back to the C, to the B note, which in the key of C is the seventh interval, a pretty dissonant note in the totality of the scale, but a chord tone of our E minor chord. You have two levels of resolution in a song. The resolution of the phrase and how it works with the chord, and the resolution in the totality of a song. Not all intervals are created equal. Some of these intervals are a little harder to use. Some of them are a little easier to use. In fact, the pentatonic scale for that reason is kind of like bumper bowling, because the major pentatonic, for example, removes the fourth interval and the seventh interval. So if you look at C major scale, C, D, F, G, A, B, C. To make it the C major pentatonic, you remove the F note and the B note, which are the 4th and 7th intervals, which are the two most dissonant intervals and hardest to use in the scale. Also, they're the ones that have half steps, and they sit only one note away from the E and one note away from the C. So by taking those out, essentially you make your melody like bumper bowling, in which it is very, very hard to choose a bad note. Composing with the pentatonic scale is much easier. C, D, E, G, A, C. So we have no more half steps. Okay, so that's how you identify a phrase, the length of it, and that's also how you identify how it resolves over the chords that it finishes on. But the next question is, how do we apply this to become a better musician? Let's put this into action and let's take it from the paper to the ukulele and see how we can get better with it. Let's bring up a little bit of Al Green like I referenced earlier. This is 2 measures of F and 2 of D minor. Let's just give it a down, down, up, down, up, and play through 2 on F and 2 on D minor. We're in the key of F, so we're playing a 1, 6. The melody goes, I'm so in love with you. A note, 2 A notes, C, E, C, C, O, 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 3, 7, 3, 3. I'm so in love with you. Okay, so that is our melody, or that's our phrase. It goes up to that E note and then resolves on the C note. So it resolves on a C note over a D chord. The notes of a D chord are D, F, A. And for that matter, the notes of an F chord are F, A, C. So even though we never play an F note, everything we do over the F chord is chord tones. A, C, A, C, all chord tones. When we get to the D though, we play an E note and a C note. The D minor chord has a D note, an F note, and an A note. Well, I don't hear either E or C. So what's going on? What's going on is by adding an E note, we add our 9th interval, making our D minor a D minor 9, which is acceptable harmony. It's outside the chord tones, but a good rule of thumb is the 2 and the 6th are 2 intervals that are not in your chord that will sound great when added to your chord. The ones that you want to use with a little more caution are the 4 and the 7. But when we add a C note to a D minor chord, the C note is the flat 7th interval, which is an unstable tone. So it makes our D minor a D minor 7. But it is a tense note. It's a resolution that's like, oh man, that's a little tense. So we get, that's our first phrase. Let's look at the next phrase. Let's take a look at the second phrase. Now you saw the first phrase when we put it up wasn't a full 4 measures. So our second phrase is actually starting over the D minor on the 4th measure because the first one was just 3. It sounds like this. First fret of the E, open, 1st fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret, 1, 1. So we get root, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 4, or yeah, 4, 4, the interval. That's just running through the F major scale, skipping the 2nd interval. Okay, pretty common. But when we drop down, we get to the 4th interval. The 4th interval in general, we looked at, is a trickier interval. So what they've done is they've harmonized it with a B flat chord. B flat note, B flat chord, a nice chord tone, very easy, safe resolution. The B flat is our 4 chord. Nothing too fancy there. So let's take a look at the next phrase. The progression here is going to go from a B flat to a B flat minor on the way to F. Now, this movement could have its whole own video, but just know when you're using the Roman numeral system, your 4 chord can become a minor chord on the way to 1. So we can play B flat minor to our F chord. Very cool trick. Space Oddity uses it. The Beatles use it a ton. It's kind of a British invasion trick. So our melody over this part goes. 1 3 0 1 4 1. Back to the E string 1. F G A B flat D flat. We'll talk about that. To the B flat to the F. So we're back to our F note, our root note, and we've resolved the idea where we started. Now, when it went from the B flat to the B to the B flat, it's moving the D note to a D flat. So that change in chord, this special chord, means we can use this special note. The B flat chord would need a D note. The B flat minor, you get this chord tone here, the D flat, and that's the only time you can use it because we're sneaking that chord in. It is a chord tone. The D flat is in the B flat minor. So by using this special little chord that isn't in the key, we have an opportunity to use notes that aren't in the key. So this is called modulation. Sometimes when you use a chord that comes from another key, you are presented with the opportunity to create a melody that uses notes that come from another key as well. I hope that that doesn't make this whole lesson blow it up and make it super confusing. Just note that we stayed with chord tones. If you feel overwhelmed by that, we stayed with chord tones because a D flat, B flat, and an F note are the 3 notes that make up a B flat minor. So it's this note, this chord here is a B flat, F, and a D flat chord. D flat, B flat, F. We just played the 3 notes in this chord. That's it, okay? So don't let that hang you up too much. Don't get too confused on that. Then we're back to the F note, which starts this whole thing. So examining that Al Green, how can we use that to practice? That's the question. The first thing I like to do in this exercise is I like to transpose the chords to a new key. Okay, you could do this to a key that you're more comfortable in playing, one that you know the scale, and it would make it easier in the first place. But this just makes it sound different enough where it can feel original. If transposition is too hard for you, you can do this exercise in the same key. So let's look at our chord progression. It was 2 of F, 2 of D minor, 2 of B flat, 2 of B flat minor. So what we're going to do is we are going to change that to the key of C, where we are going to play a C, our 1, 6 chord A minor, F chord for our 4 chord, F minor. And we'll just use our strum pattern down, down, up, down, up, 2 times over each chord. C, C, A minor, A minor, F, F, F minor, F minor. Okay, so that's our new progression. So what we're going to do now, putting all these things together, is we're going to do something I call jam by numbers. You remember those paint by numbers where you'd have the number and that would help you choose the paint and you could still create a masterpiece? We're going to do that by taking the previous phrasing and putting just the last note in the exact same place. So before we jump in, what I want to show you is I want to show you the melody with just the points of resolution. So we bring it up and you see the first 4 measures are C and A minor, and our points of resolution here, we only have 1, and it is the 3rd beat on the 3rd measure, and it's a G note because we are resolving on the 5th interval, the same way that Al did. He resolved on the 5th interval over the 6th chord, making the A minor and A minor 7, all right? Then the next thing that he did was he kicked it off on that 4th measure, but we bring up the next 4, and the resolution of the 2nd phrase happened right there on the 5th measure, 3rd beat, 4th interval, key key of C, it's an F note. So we resolve our second phrase there, okay? And then the third phrase was that minor arpeggio that finished on the root note on the third beat of the eighth measure. So exactly where you start your phrases is not super important, but let's look phrase by phrase, and I'm just going to fill it in to show you how I started with the resolution and then worked my way towards the resolution. Okay, so there's a different angle because I actually taught the melody. It was all improvised, and by the time I went to record it, I forgot it. So I have to do this part a little bit again. So let's bring up the first four measures. The most important note here is the third fret on the third beat of the third measure, because this is a G note, and that is the fifth interval. This is exactly the same interval and the same place that the resolution happened in the first phrase by Al Green. So in that first phrase by Al Green, we went through and analyzed it, and he used the fifth interval on the third beat of the third measure. So we're doing the same, but since we're in the key of C, we need to do so with the G note. No. Getting closer. Okay, I like that. Okay, so what I came up with was the third fret of the A string for a whole measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Open A on the first beat. 1, 2. Open E string, first fret on the third beat. So 3 and 4. Then we play the open E on the first beat. 1, 2, and the third fret on the third beat, which is where we resolve our idea. And this is the exact same as the Al Green. So that's how we did that. We took the phrasing that we did there, we put it there, and then I just filled in and created a melody that led to that same resolution. The only thing I'm thinking about is how Al Green resolves his phrase, and how can I create a phrase that resolves in the same place. So we repeated that exercise with the next phrase. You'll see this one starts here on the fourth measure, but doesn't finish on the fourth measure. We're going to play the open A string, third fret, first fret, open E, and then we go into the next four. If you remember on this one, he harmonized his second phrase by finishing on the third beat of the fifth measure, with the fourth interval. In the key of C, the fourth interval is an F, so our phrase will resolve in the same place, fifth measure, third beat with the fourth interval. So again, we just find where he resolves his idea and we fill it in, paint it in by numbers. Also, if you remember, his last resolution was that B flat minor. For us, it's an F minor. The notes of an F minor are F, G sharp, C. And we're going to do that same walk down, G sharp, F, C, from the fourth on the E string to the first fret to the open C string. Okay, we're going to do that same exact movement, but we need something that builds up to it. So the run up goes open C, second fret, open E, first fret, third fret, open E, first fret. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the phrase. So why don't we go ahead and play the whole thing with the strumming at the same time. See what that looks like. And there you have it. That is the whole lesson, a really epic lesson. We played it together. The next step, if I wanted to, would actually be to take that melody and construct lyrics. Now, the ukulele is kind of hard to sing along with the male voice. I'd actually learn that melody here, take it to the piano, and I would write lyrics for it. But that is how I could create a song with phrasing inspired by Al Green. And this whole time too, I am taking mental notes so I can internalize these things and use them for soloing as well, knowing that these intervals over these chords work, transposing these ideas so I know my seventh interval always works over the 3 chord no matter what I'm soloing in any key. So that helps my improvisation as well. So there you have it. That's what phrasing is, how to analyze it, and an exercise that you can do to create your own melodies inspired by your favorite artist and their phrasing as well. This, you're gonna maybe watch this one a couple of times, but it will definitely take you from the strummer, which is cool again, to the musician. All right, see you next Wednesday or Saturday. Any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Take care, have a lovely day, rock and roll.